Hello, Bob Reedfield here, preaching and teaching minister of the Spring Hill Christian Church of rural Oaklockney, Georgia. And I know it's been a while since we have had a video lesson, um, specifically the one from now to eternity, prophecy in the end times, um, written by Dr. Jack Cottrell and is part of his collected writings of Jack Cottrell series. Is volume number 12. Published by the Christian Restoration Association. All the information that I get for this study comes from just what I learned from him during classes and also from this book. And so I just wanted to make sure that I gave him full credit for this. If you do remember, we started talking about life after death. The other side of death, what was going to be happening. And if you do have this book for some reason, that was in chapter 8 of his book. It's all backwards, but it's the collected writings of Dr. Jack Cottrell, volume 12, From Now to Eternity, Prophecy in the End Times, published by the Christian Restoration Association. And we start talking about the other side of death. And we looked at how on the other side of death we are going to be conscious. Some say that groups say out there that when we die that we will go to sleep and then someday we will just wake up when eternity starts. But that's not a biblical concept. We will be conscious on the other side of death. We will be bodiless. We will not have a body, so to speak. And on the other side of death, we will be perfect. And on the other side of death, we will be happy. We will be hopeful because the culmination of things will not start yet. We'll be looking forward to that, but we will be hopeful. And so today what I'm going to talk about is resurrection from the dead. And I want to share with you some things. We have, if you remember, a couple of lessons back we discussed the second coming of Christ, which is the next great event in cosmic history. It will be a time when Christ visibly appears, a time of victory and vengeance over his enemies, and a time of vindication for Christians who maintain their faith in him. But in that particular lesson, we said very little about what will happen to Christians individually at that time. So that's the topic of what we're going to be talking about in this lesson. And in this lesson, we are asking what will happen to us as Christians when Christ comes again. When Jesus returns, the first main event for the Christians will be the receiving of the new body. And eventually an event that is usually called the resurrection from the dead. What will this resurrection be like? In explaining it, we're going to answer three questions. We're going to, in reference to the resurrection from the dead, we are going to answer the questions why, how, and what. So let's go ahead and we'll start the first question. Why? Why will there be a resurrection? Why will there be such a thing as a resurrection from the dead, or the resurrection of the body? Why do we need a body for eternity anyway? Aren't we just going to, like fly away like a butterfly that's been set free from its limiting cocoon? Here's how the singer Dottie Rambo, some of you may or may not be familiar with this singer, put it in a song called The Hills of Home. Says, this house of clay is but a prison. Bars of bones bowl or hold my soul. But the doors of clay are gonna burst wide open when the angel sets my spirit free. I'll take my flight like a mighty eagle when the hills of home start calling me. Now, this is an interesting song, but it is very bad theology. It suggests that we are all better off without any kind of body. And this is false, however. Our souls need bodies for authentic human living. And here's why. First of all, we need a body because that's who we are. It's our very nature as human beings to have a body. When God created us, He made us out of two different kinds of stuff: physical stuff and spiritual stuff. Thus, we are both body and soul, and that is how God intends for us to exist. This is what makes us unique. Our dual nature is contrary to angels, whose nature is to be spirit only, and it's contrary to animals, whose nature is to be body only. A main theme of many pagan theologies or pagan philosophies and religions is that the body is not actually real. They base this assumption on the odd idea that the whole material world is an illusion. And this is the view, for example, of cults known as metaphysical cults, such as Christian Science, whose founder Mary Baker Eddy said in her faux Bible, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, man is not matter. He is not made up of brains, blood, bones, and other material elements. The Scriptures inform us that man is made in the image and likeness of God. Matter is not that likeness. Man is spiritual and perfect. And that comes from her 1917 edition, page 475. God, spirit being all, nothing is matter. The fading forms of matter, the most mortal body and material earth are the fleeting concepts of the human mind. Since mind and matter are opposites, both cannot be real. Matter is an error. Matter and death are mortal illusions. Spirit and all things spiritual are the real. A group called Daniel Amos sang the following song by Terry Taylor in 1978, which shows the inconsistency of Mary Baker Eddy's false doctrine. And it goes like this: I read a book tells me death doesn't really exist. The author died years ago. I think that is rather a twist. She said the body was only in somebody's dream, but we all know she wore clothes and kept that body quite clean. We might have believed her if her teeth hadn't fallen out. Mary Baker Eddy, we might have believed her if her teeth hadn't fallen out. Is your religion as false as the teeth that reside in your mouth? Baker Faker, do you breathe? Do you bleed? Do you see that it all really is all really there while you deny the fact you are steadily losing your hair? She said that Jesus was merely a perfect man, but I never heard of her dying and rising again. Another of the major examples of those who say that the material body is not real comes from the prevailing form of pagan Eastern metaphysics, Sankaran Hinduism. It says that only spirit, the one, the absolute Brahman, is real, and the material world is Maya, an illusion. Man's true nature is his identity with the eternal divine spirit. The late 20th century fad known as the New Age movement was just basically westernized Hinduism. It said that the human body as it appears to our senses is not how human beings really exist. The individual's true nature, which can be known only by means of mystical experience, is his participation in the universe, non-material mass of vibrating energy, which is equated with quote-unquote God in little g. Now, such a view, whether from cults or pagan religions, is contrary to both experience and clear biblical teaching. It's especially contrary to one of the most basic of all biblical doctrines, the doctrine of creation. When in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, this act of creation brought real physical stuff into existence. And this is what our bodies are made of. They are real. They are part of our genuine human nature. And secondly, after we die, our intermediate bodiless state is unnatural. Uh, when we looked at, started talking our last session about life after death, we saw that when we die, our body and our spirit are separated. And the spirit does live on without the body. But this separation is not akin to the butterfly that just naturally flies away from its preparatory caterpillar and cocoon stages. Our spirit's existence without a body is contrary to our nature. Many religions believe just the opposite of this. They teach that it is unnatural to have a body, and that at death we are set free from the body. They think that that existing in the body is like being in chains. They look upon the body as a kind of tomb that imprisons and limits the spirit. This is especially true of the philosophical concept known as pagan dualism, taught in a lot of philosophy classes, of which the Gnostic religion of New Testament times is an example. The Gnostics were influenced by something called Orphism, which existed centuries before Christ. W. David Stacy describes it this way. He says, Orphism taught that the body was a prison house for the soul and a hindrance in the struggle to be free. A phrase was coined, soma sema, the body is a tomb. The idea behind the phrase occurs again and again in the subsequent thought of Greece. Not only did the body cramp the soul, but it was of evil origin and needed to be subjected that the soul might attain its freedom. So the practice of asceticism grew. Earthly life as a whole was rejected. Every tie that bound a man to the body had to be broken. The two elements are not merely separate but antagonistic, and the divine soul is always struggling to be free from the cramping effect of the base, inglorious body. And that's found in Macmillan, the Pauline view of man, in 1956 on page 63. Following Orphism, Pythagoras believed that the soul had been confined in the body as a punishment. Plato also taught that the body is the enemy of the soul, or a prison for the soul. And under the influence of Orphism, he agreed that the real man was the psyche, in other words, the soul. He said union with the body is the great misfortune of the soul, whose task is to break free from bodily existence. We can expect such wrong ideas from pagans. But unfortunately, many Christians have adopted this same negative view of the physical body. The church father Origen from the 3rd century AD said that the body is a kind of disciplinary penalty, a purgatory for fallen souls, a punishment for sins committed in a disembodied pre-existent state. The purpose of our present bodily state is to discipline us so that we will be worthy of being just pure souls again. A popular 20th century Christian writer, C.S. Lovett, in his popular self-published book, Jesus Wants You Well, says this: man is not a body, he merely wears one. The body is wholly separate from the person who lives inside it. There is no organic connection between a man and the body he wears. When a diver descends into the ocean, he needs a diving suit. When God's image comes into the world, he needs an earth suit. The human body is merely a creature the Lord designed to house his image on earth. The image of God and his earth suits are two separate creatures. God's image is a living being with his own life. The animal he occupies is also a living creature. It surprises me to see that influential Christian writer, Philip Yancey, approves C.S. Lewis's thought an individual person is a spirit made in the image of God, but merged temporarily with a shell of flesh. We are, after all, immortals trapped in mortal surroundings. In all of earth, there are no exact parallels of spirit and immortality trapped in matter. And that's from Christianity Today in 1984. What even surprises me more to see that this view is supposed to be that of C.S. Lewis. What are these people saying, whether they're pagan or Christian? What they're saying is that our present body's existence is unnatural, and that the bodiless state that follows death is natural for human beings. So at death, we can say to the body, good riddance, free at last. We don't need no stinking body, so to speak. And as the Stoic philosopher Seneca, who was a contemporary with the Apostle Paul, said, from the body the soul springs forth, and never thereafter does it ask what is to befall the husk that is left behind. Just as we are unconcerned about the clippings of beard and hair, so upon its departure from man's mortal frame, the divine soul judges that its receptacle's final destiny is of no more relevance to itself than the afterbirth is to a newborn child. Whether it will be thrown to the birds to tear apart or whether to be consumed, how can it concern a nobody? Why stay attached to it as if it were part of you? It was only your hull. And that's from the Stoic philosophy of Seneca. There was a late Cincinnati a businessman and lay Christian leader by the name of Thomas R. Doc Rusk, who repeated this idea. He said, I look upon my body as just a package that contains my soul while I am here on earth. Like any other package, it is of value only while it contains the thing for which it was designed. Since my soul is eternal, it leaves my body when the package is destroyed by death. Once that happens, the body is of no further value. And that's from the 1974 October 6th edition of Cincinnati Enquirer. Now, some of this does apply to our present sin-cursed and fallen bodies, in the sense that we will have no further use for this particular body once we've died. But this is not the idea that is being taught in those things that I just read. These writers are saying that our existence in any kind of material body is unnatural, and we should be glad that death sets us free from such a miserable state. But this is wrong, very wrong. In the last lesson that we talked about, we saw that Paul speaks of our bodiless state as a kind of homelessness or nakedness. It's an unnatural state brought about by an unnatural event, death. We have to remember that death itself, the monster that swallows up our bodies, is itself not natural for human beings. It's an enemy caused by sin, according to Genesis chapter 3. Also see Genesis chapter 2, verse 17, Ezekiel 18:20, Romans 1, verses 32, Romans 5, chapter 5, verses 12 and following, Romans 6:23, Romans chapter 8, verse 10. Until Jesus came the first time, death reigned as a usurping monarch over the earth. Romans 5:14 and 17. It was the instrument by which Satan held us captive. Hebrews chapter 2, verses 14 and 15. Third, the resurrection of the body is needed to defeat our last enemy, death. Speaking of Jesus, the Apostle Paul says, for he must reign until he has put all his enemies under his feet. The last enemy that will be abolished is death. 1 Corinthians 15, verses 25 and 26. When the casket closes and when it is lowered into the ground and when the dirt is thrown over it, that is our enemy, death, the very gates of Hades, swallowing up and devouring a part of our very selves. This is why we need the resurrection of our bodies at Christ's return. The resurrection is Christ's victory and our victory over this wretched enemy called death. As a result of his own resurrection, Jesus could announce, I am the living one, and I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and of Hades, Revelation chapter 1, verse 18. When Jesus comes the second time, he will appear as the one who abolished death and brought life and immortality to light, 2 Timothy 1:10. He will then apply those keys of death and of Hades, the place of death, to each one of us and produce for us a brand new, glorified, and eternal body to go with our perfected soul. See 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 54 and 55. But when this perishable will have put on the imperishable, and this mortal will have put on immortality, then will come about the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? We should remember that this belief in the resurrection of our bodies makes Christianity different from most religions of the world. See Acts chapter 17, verses 31 through 32, for an example of how odd the idea sounded to Paul's pagan Greek audience. So, how will the resurrection happen? That's what we're going to find out in our next lesson. I hope you have enjoyed this lesson, this first part of a 3-part lesson on the resurrection of our bodies. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and may God bless you.